We have some amazing guests. I'm going to bring them up one at a time. He directed the Karate Kid trilogy. He directed many other amazing films, including Joe, Save the Tiger, The Formula, Neighbors, Lean on Me. He received an Academy Award for Best Director for Rocky, which was also named Best Picture. Please welcome John G. Avildsen. He played Johnny Lawrence of the Cobra Kai. Please welcome William Zabka. He played Bobby Brown, also of the Cobra Kai. Please welcome Ron Talmas. And he played Darryl Vidal, who also created the crane technique. Please welcome Darryl Vidal. Well, before we start with Karate Kid, John, I just have to ask, what is it like to be nominated for an Academy Award and to then receive one?
Not bad. But I don't know if it compares to this. This was just great. What a treat. Look at this. I can't tell you how happy this screening made me, and the fact that all you guys showed up and liked it. I'm really very pleased.
Now, John, when you make a film that's this good, at what point in the process do you just know it's just firing on all cylinders, it's working, the relationships, it's entertaining, it's got humor? Is that somewhere in the editing process, or do you know even on set?
It happened 30 years ago when I took my son Anthony, the guy behind the camera over there, when he was about like this, and his brother Jonathan, and we went to the Ziegfeld Theater in New York. And they freaked out at the end. That's when I was encouraged.
Okay. And how did this project come to be?
Well, I'm sure that Rocky had something to do with it. That's why I was on the list of potential directors. And Jerry Weintraub, who produced it, saw this story in the paper about a kid in the valley who was getting beat up all the time, and he went and learned karate, and the kids left him alone, and he thought that would make a good movie, and he tracked down Robert Kamen, who wrote this incredible script, and he hired me. So I tell you folks, luck is a big factor in this business, and I've been very, very lucky.
Well, I don't think you make a movie this good by luck, but I understand what you're saying.
It doesn't hurt.
Now, William, and then going down the line, when did you first hear about this film?
I was in college. I was a film major at Cal State Northridge, and I just graduated high school. I was still 17, and I got a phone call from my manager that the casting director, Caro Jones and Penny DuPont, wanted to see me for a movie called The Karate Kid. I went in, and they handed me the script, and then they told me that I was a black belt and I was a motorcycle gang leader, and I said, well, I have no chance in that. I don't know karate, I never rode a motorcycle in my life. And I went home with the script, and then the audition process started.
Now, don't you tell them you know karate and you know how to ride a motorcycle?
Yeah, that's right. I did a lot of commercials when I was a kid, and you always say, "Yeah, I love that pizza," you know, if you're allergic to it, you know. You do. You just go, "Oh, I love that," you know. It's dangerous, but I love it. With this one, I think I probably said I'm very athletic. I was a wrestler in high school. I was a second city wrestling champ, so I was very limber. But that was it. But I read the script and instantly connected with Johnny, which I don't know if that's a good thing. I love this guy.
Ron, how about you? When did you first hear about the project?
I was just here in Hollywood doing my thing, you know, going out on auditions, and I got a call one day from my agent who said, I was doing the Conan show up at Universal Studios, actually, and the director in the Conan show said, "You got to read for this movie. You're a black belt, you know, Karate Kid." And I said, "Karate Kid." And then that same day, my agent called me and said, "You got an audition, just go do your thing." So I just went on the audition, and my agent actually said, this is a true story, she said, "Don't tell them you're a martial artist." I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah, don't tell them because they're going to train you anyway and they want good actors." So in those days, like black belts and martial artists and action stars and actors didn't go together, right? You were a good martial artist, but you weren't a good actor. So she said, don't say anything. They're going to train you anyway. They're looking for actors. So I didn't say anything until about 6 weeks in when Pat Johnson came up to me and said, "You know something, don't you?" You know,
It's true. I totally remember that.
Yeah.
Like, we were like scrapping it up, and he's like doing that. He was a world champion or something at that point.
Not back then.
Almost.
I was like a first.
Yeah, but he's like way advanced. We're like, this guy is like, he knows something.
Darryl, how about you? When did you first hear about it?
Well, I was probably the only one that wasn't working in Hollywood. I was doing karate, and and I think it's true what he's saying, because I wasn't doing any acting. But I was at a tournament one weekend. We used to do them all the time, and I had won the division. And Mr. Avildsen came up and said, "How'd you like to be in a movie?" So I said, "Yeah, I want to be the next Bruce Lee. What are you going to do?" It's pretty amazing.
John, can you talk about developing the script with Robert Kamen once he came on board?
Yes, Robert had written the script. I started working with him. He and I struck up a friendship that endures today, and we just had the best time in the world working on it and making fun of Ralph, and we hit it off, and I wanted him around all the time, and he fortunately was, and because you can't do any of this stuff without a script. You can be, you know, real clever and have all sorts of gadgets and stuff, but if it's not on the page, if it's not, the story isn't there, you're talking to yourself. And Robert wrote a terrific story, and we're all dependent on the writer, and the writer gets not nearly enough credit in this art form as he or she deserves. And I just wish Robert were here. He's in France or China writing another movie.
Yeah, I heard from him and he wanted to be here, but he's in France, so.
Yes.
Can you talk about the relationships in this movie are really rich. I mean, from the very beginning, you see the relationship between Daniel and his mother, and it's very real. And then you see his relationship with Allie, and of course with Mr. Miyagi. And you talk about developing those on the page and then taking that into rehearsal and then ultimately shooting.
Well, the relationships were there in the cold light of day of the words on a page. But then once we had the good fortune of getting these terrific actors, and I knew zip about karate. I knew nothing about boxing either. Billy mentions Caro Jones, who was my casting director, who worked with me on a number of movies. The first person Caro brought in for me to see was Pat Morita. And I had never heard of Pat Morita. I'd never seen Happy Days, so I knew nothing about Pat Morita. He came in, I had a little video camera set up next to me. I said, "You want any question?" "No." okay, here we go. And we started reading the scene. By the way, that audition tape is on YouTube, and you can see that actual tape the first time he read the script. And I cut Ralph's audition together, and it looks like they're talking to each other. And so I was wiped out. I said, wow, that's terrific, you know. And I went in to see Jerry Weintraub, the producer. I said, I just read this guy. He's incredible. He's Mr. Miyagi. I don't know how, you know, we can stop looking. He said, who are you talking about? I said, Pat Morita. And he said, give me a break, Pat Morita. He's a comic. He's a stand-up comic. He calls himself the Hip Nip. We've got to find a real actor. So we spent a lot of time looking for a real actor, and after 2 or 3 weeks, I was fortunate enough to prevail on Jerry, and he gave him a screen test, and it became clear to everybody that Pat Morita was in fact Mr. Miyagi. Thank goodness. Because that relationship, he was the surrogate father that everybody would want. I mean, what a great character. And the way that Pat immortalized him was just pure genius. I miss him, and I wish he were here. I wish Ralph were here too, and he and Marty Cove are hiding out in Philadelphia. That's why they're not here.
Do you guys have memories of working with Pat Morita?
Oh yeah. I remember, well, of course I knew Pat from Happy Days, and I remember when I got cast, I was pinching myself because I don't know if you remember, John, but you only cast me for one scene in the movie, and it was a scene that was cut out of the film when I had Daniel a death certificate at the water fountain. So now all of a sudden I said, wow, I did that scene great, but now I have to play this whole character for the whole movie, and I was a little nervous. So I remember walking with Pat Morita, and I asked him, I said, you know, I told him, I said, if you see anything I do that could be done differently, please don't hesitate to step in, you know. And so he kind of took me under his arm, and I got really close with Pat and called him Uncle Pat. He called me BZ. Hey, BZ. And actually the fence fight scene, I remember we were rehearsing that scene, and I was doing it a certain way at a certain energy. And I remember he pulled me aside and he said, BZ, come here, come here. He said, listen, he goes, you know, you're giving it half, you're going half at it. You got to give it 110%, man. So when the cameras are rolling, it's like bread and butter. And I was like, wow. So in the rehearsals, we brought it up even to another level. And then when cameras rolled, it probably exceeded that. So he was great, and he was a dear friend. And he, yeah, we talked all the way up to just before he passed, actually. We talked every Christmas and Thanksgiving, and just a beautiful, beautiful man. Loved him a lot.
Did he have that mafia accent you were just doing?
Yeah, BZ, come here, I want to talk to you. That's how I remember him.
We called him Uncle Pat. He's the sweetest guy. I remember, I have several memories with Pat. I remember one time I had an audition for another show while we were filming, and I had to cry. And I said, you know, I got this audition. I just don't do tears that well, that easily, you know. He said, don't blink. Just keep your eyes open. Don't blink until they start to water. I said, okay, I'll try that. Didn't work. Didn't get the job. I remember one sweet memory, though, was a few years after, several years after we had done filming. I hadn't seen Pat for several years, and I ran into him up at Universal Studios, up at the hotel, and he invited me upstairs to his suite, and he had this dinner prepared. He had about 20 people over, and then he knew that I had a martial arts school. The Conan show had closed. I was kind of an out-of-work actor at that point, and I opened up my own martial arts school because I needed to eat. And no, I actually do love the martial arts. And he came to my dojo to talk to the kids. And I was having a big test, and we did a big demonstration, and he came in and sat down with the kids. And if you guys could have seen these kids and their faces when Mr. Miyagi walked in. Sensei Ron did not exist at that point. It was really cool. And Billy and I flew to Vegas for his funeral. Miss him.
Darryl, how about you?
Well, I didn't spend that much time with him except on set. He was a great guy, definitely a funny guy. Probably the best memory I have is a few years after the film, my wife wanted him to call me on my birthday, my 30th birthday. So this is what, 1993 or so.
Long time ago.
Yeah, I know, we're aging ourselves. But yeah, sure enough, I'm at a birthday party at my house my wife had thrown for me, and he calls on the phone, and he's in Vegas, and he just wanted to wish me a happy birthday, and you know, I just got to hand it to him. What a great guy to take the time out and, you know, wish me a happy birthday of all people. So it was great.
Now, John, watching the film again, I was really struck by how you blocked and photographed scenes, many of them in oneers. And I wonder if you could talk about, is it something that comes out of your preparation? Is it something that comes out on set? Is it a combination of both? Because I think it's very effective.
Well, first I had a terrific cameraman, Jimmy Craig, made a lot of movies with him, and he loved the process as much as I did. So we were very good chums, and before when I began, I was my own cameraman, and when I came out here for the first time to make a Hollywood movie, it was the first time I couldn't operate the camera myself, and Jimmy was the cameraman, and he allowed me to, and many times sneak me in. So he and I were very tight. So that was one thing. Second was I'm a big believer in rehearsing and videoing, or 8 before video. The rehearsal, and this is long before the crew shows up. This is during the rehearsal period of it, hopefully at least 2 weeks, so that the actors get to try out this and that. How about this line? Let's play. Move over by the window, and you rehearse at the locations where you're really going to shoot the thing. So you take advantage of the place, and you're not doing it the day where you have to shoot it, where it's very expensive because everybody you're looking at is making a lot of money. So you rehearse when there's nobody around, and you have time, and you try things, and you video, and you look at it after to see if you like it. On YouTube, all the rehearsal videos of this thing are cut together, and you can see that it's pretty closely follows the movie. So when there's a cut, no matter how good the cut is, it's an interruption. So the more you can play something in one shot without a cut, the more the actors are into it, the more the audience is into it, and the more you get drawn into the scene, because there's not that cut that, however, subconsciously you know that something happened. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Mr. Miyagi is nursing Daniel back to health from the fence fight, and that was all shot in one, starting with the cloth in the medicine and the bum and the belt, and then the guy goes out. And the actors were they really nailed it. The camera operator was right there, and I remember calling up Jerry Weintraub, and I said, I just shot this thing in one, and it was great. I don't think I need any coverage. And he said, well, then go home. And that's what we did. Another incident like that was the final fight, and that wasn't the end of the movie. The end of the movie took place out in the parking lot, where Miyagi and Kreese have a showdown. But when we finished shooting the tournament, and the crowd carried Daniel off on their shoulders. I think it was also New Year's Eve. May have been a factor. But I thought, wow, how am I gonna, we don't have to go out in the parking lot. How can I beat this? So I called up Jerry and I said, I think we got it. I don't think we have to do that parking lot scene. I think, and he said, well, then go home. So that's what we did. And I cut the thing together and I showed it to a bunch of folks who worked at Warner Brothers, who were in all different capacities and stuff, not the brass. I believe in showing your movie as soon as it's together, no matter how rough it is, to start getting feedback from your audience to see what they think, because you're making it for them. So we showed the movie, and everybody liked it. And the lady in the back raised her hand. I said, and she said, I liked the movie very much, but I wanted to see Mr. Miyagi and Daniel together at the end. I said, you're right. That's how it was written. The two of them in the parking lot, and they walk off into the sunset. And I didn't have that shot that ends the movie here where Mr. Miyagi looks up proudly. The last shot I had was Daniel going off on everybody's shoulders. So I said to to Jerry and to the Warner Brothers executive, I need one more shot. I need a shot of Mr. Miyagi looking up at Daniel, and that will bring them together. And they said, no, the thing is fine. We don't want to do reshooting. You start reshooting, people start saying you got a turkey. No more shooting. I said, come on, this is just one shot. All I need is a stepladder, an airy, and 3 people to walk in front of the camera, and Pat looking up beaming. And I went on and I pleaded, and then I said, I'll pay for it, and finally they said, okay. And that's why we have that last shot of Pat.
Billy and Ron, can you talk about the rehearsal process, and was there any particular bonding of the Cobra Kai actors, or?
Yes. The rehearsal process was physical primarily first for us, and Pat Johnson was our trainer, so which was really helpful for me as an actor, because Johnny's such a physical character, and Pat Johnson's a master black belt, and so he trained me in the way that Kreese would have trained Johnny, but he let me know the difference. So he kind of downloaded, almost injected Johnny into me subconsciously, and I sort of picked him up. So a lot of the rehearsal process was physical, and not so much that, I don't recall, we had some table readings and one up at Jerry's house, but most of it was very physical, chasing Ralph down at the fence fight and all these things. So, and then the fight scene, we trained every day from the time we started, 5 days a week, 4 hours a day. And Ralph and I would start with our pads on, and we'd be maybe 4 feet from each other, and then bit by bit over the time get closer and closer, more comfortable until the pads could come off to where we're pretty close to each other. So we did that every day. It was like dance, and it was really like rehearsing, and all that physicality really helped out in that case. I remember during the process that John here asked us not to hang around so much, me and Ralph, because Ralph and I, we get along today. But John didn't want it to show up. He's like, go hang around with the Cobra Kais. Which we did anyway. It was like instant connection. We were like, we were 17, 18. I was 14. You're what, 23? It's a 30th today, right? Goodness gracious. But we hung around a lot, and we went after we got to what's now Moe's. It may have been Moe's then. Yeah, all the time. What was it?
Hamburger Hamlet.
No, it wasn't Hamburger Hamlet. It was
not Hamburger Hamlet.
Across from Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So we got really close. Chad McQueen would come over to the house, and it was great. He used to come. I had a Honda Accord, the sunroof, and Chad would come over in his little 911 Carrera, pulling up a cigarette in his hand, cranking the tunes. Hey, let's go, Follow him to work. I'd be in my Honda Accord. He'd be in his little Carrera. That was fun.
The rehearsal process was it was amazing. Not just, this he's brilliant. He's a genius. And filming and videoing, and he made us rehearse like everything, like he said, shoot the movie ahead before we shot the movie. But I've got so many great memories of the rehearsal process. It was just so cool because we got to rehearse soccer, And I remember they called and they said, yeah, this guy's coming in. He used to play with Pele. He's going to come in and train you guys in soccer. And then we had a stunt guy. And I remember one time, I guess John decided that we couldn't ride motorcycles as well as we should. So back in the day when you worked as an actor on a Sunday, we got golden time. Which is like basically double time. Remember? Triple time on Sunday. I was like, thank you, John. So he said we couldn't ride, and so he had the stunt guy come in, and not Pat, I forgot his name. Anyway, we went over to the Warner Brothers set on the back lot over there where they had Fantasy Island set and all these Western sets. You remember this? Yeah. And we got on the motorcycles, and it was on a Sunday. Nobody was around, dirt, everything. So we're spinning donuts on the Fantasy Island set. We're tearing this. We went up these wooden ramps on this old, on the old Western sets. We went inside the buildings with our motorcycles, man. We were just driving around getting paid triple time, having a blast. It was awesome. Setting up jumps, flying off. Yeah, it was just cool. It was really cool.
Let's talk about working with Ralph Macchio.
Well, Ralph was the first actor that Caro brought in for Daniel. And on the same day I auditioned Ralph in New York, I auditioned Robert Downey Jr. I think Robert Downey Jr. came in right after Ralph, and I was very taken with Ralph. He was really had a connection with the character, and his first reading was beautiful, and it's on YouTube. Now, what's the difference between Ralph Macchio and Robert Downey Jr.? One of them is the Iron Man. And one of them is vulnerable. And Daniel had to be vulnerable. And Robert Downey Jr. is a terrific actor, but vulnerability, you notice he never plays that. And with Ralph, it was close to the surface, and that's why he nailed it so terrifically. And I wanted to tell him that that he had it, but I knew that there were a lot of other people. I had to read people out here, so it'd be premature to do that. So I didn't, but I told him not to leave town, and that we'd see what happened, and it worked out. He was terrific, and he was always there and always focused, and an absolute delight to work with.
Billy, how about you, working with Ralph?
Who? Love Ralph. I remember my audition when I finally got the part. There was, I think, 3 guys left, and I had to go in and read for John with Ralph, and we were in the parking lot. And I met him, and I had just seen The Outsiders, and I was kind of in awe of him, and I was a little nervous. And there was something about him. He was just really relaxed and really organic, and really, he said, he saw me stuttering on a couple words. He goes, yeah, I think they changed this, and he kind of set me free, kind of loosened me up, and then went into the room with him, and we did the audition, and I waited for him till everybody was done, and then I said, hey, how'd it go? And he said, well, I told John everybody, was great. He goes, but you scared the shit out of me, I'm like, cool, yeah. So, yeah. My first meeting with Ralph was just really nice and sweet in the parking lot, just 2 young guys, just working together, and it was fun. And then as the characters kind of came in and we were kind of trained and told to separate, it was great. We had a lot of trust in each other, and there was a lot of physicality. Like the fence fight scene was the one time when I accidentally did kick him in the face, and that was really hard, and still hurt from that to this day, really. It was awful because you're really trusting each other. His fists are flying and legs are flying, and you're coming just a couple inches in front. This man, by the way, is the real deal. Did I get a point on you, Darryl? Yeah, no, in the fight, I can't remember. Yeah, I did. No, did you get a point on me? I mean, yeah, that's. I was watching it tonight, and I'm like, how did he not get a point? This guy, man, he made me look good, you know, really. And but you know, with Ralph, it was just great. I mean, John had us pinned against each other, and all the way to the end. And the ending emotion for me when I hand him the trophy is really kind of like the real Billy that I was suppressing the whole time. And I was really relieved to go, "You're all right, Lewis." There's a lot of venom I had to play in that movie. So it's a good release, and it was really kind of how I honestly felt at the end after my mom is crying in the stands because my whole family was up in there booing at me, and my mom said, "That's my son, he's a nice guy." Shut up, I'm acting. I'm a character. Yeah, so it was great, you know, and yeah, so it was a great, I learned a lot from Ralph. I learned a lot from all of them. All of them made us look good, especially you.
Ron, how about you? Any memories of working with Ralph?
Tons of them. Just Ralph is just the first thing that strikes me is he's just a super nice guy. He's just a sweet guy. And I have several stories. Recently, somebody contacted me on Facebook or email or something, and they asked me. They said, "That punch on the soccer field when Ralph punched you, that looks real." It was. He hit me with his forearm. He's supposed to come across my face, but his forearm hit me in the mouth and bloodied my mouth. And then, you know, after the scene was over, John said, "Cut." Ralph was the first guy to come up. "You okay? You okay, man?" You know, just a genuinely sweet.
I have to say too, I don't know if you did this on purpose, John, but we were kind of kept on purpose as the Cobra Kai and away from all of it. I didn't see all the intimate scenes that you all were doing with the bonsai tree and with the healing and all that. I mean, we were kind of, it's like the way I met Marty Cove was in character in the dojo, and he was Kreese. Like, in a sense, I don't know if you planned that, but in a way, it was like we really experienced it. You know, we were involved in every detail of it. You know what I mean? Like,
it makes it easier for everybody. It's let's pretend.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the more.
But you made it too real, John.
Well, it can't be too real. Right. And so it was a delight working with all these guys because we were all on the same page.
Now, Ralph couldn't be with us tonight because he is in Philly, but we have a little surprise. My friend Jimmy Palumbo got a hold of Ralph for me, and Ralph sent us a note. And to read that, we're going to bring up Eric, who is the one who contacted me about doing the screening in the first place. So, welcome, Eric, everybody.
Okay, bear with me, everybody, because I'm freaking the hell out standing next to these four right now. So. Hey all, Ralph Macchio here. Very sorry I could not attend the screenings at the New Beverly. I am with you all in spirit and always find myself humbled and inspired that this film has resonated with so many and for so long. This story and these characters represent a piece of all of us, a part of our childhoods. The fact that it continues to entertain and is passed on to generations is the highest of compliments to all. It is the gift that keeps on giving, and I'm honored and privileged to be a part of this piece of American cinema, a true highlight of my life. Daniel LaRusso is a part of me, and I'm all the richer for it. Thank you to all the fans for keeping the Karate Kid alive. Speaking of the one that actually has karate in it, just couldn't help myself. Be sure to stay clear. Be sure to stay clear of skeletons in the bathroom, and always remember to wax onward and upward, Macchio. Brian has given me a little time up here to talk to you guys, and he covered a lot of ground really well. One of the things I wanted to talk about was this has one of my favorite final acts of all time. Everything that happens at the All Valley tournament is just incredible. I mean, how many times I've seen this movie, but yet, and I know very well how it's going to end already. But God help me, when they got up and when Lawrence and Larissa square off, I'm leaning forward in my chair and like, more specifically, the fight montage is most definitely my 3 favorite minutes of cinema ever. It's just, I just watch it on YouTube sometimes, just those 3 minutes, I bring them up. It is so insanely good. And all the more better because I realize you edited it as well. On top of being director, you also edited and put that together, correct?
Yeah.
First things first, your song choice. You're the best.
Jerry Weintraub has been in the movie business for a long time, and he found this fellow, Brooks Arthur, who was the guy that rounded up all these various songwriters to write songs that would sound like popular songs, but also be germane to the story. So that's why the music is so terrific, because it was written specifically with this story in mind. And another example of Jerry Weintraub's smarts when it comes to making things work. So that's where that came from.
When you first heard that song, did you realize, this is where this is going to go? This is my Montage song.
Oh, absolutely, sure. Because it had the beats and the cuts, and before you have the real music that you are going to use, you just use whatever music is lying around that you don't own, but has the rhythm and so forth of what you'd like. So I would cut the film to that music. Then when I got the music that we were going to use, I would recut it to match the rhythm of that tune. So you're always much better off to cut to the music. Don't give something that's been cut to a composer and say, okay, write music to it, because the cuts are sort of arbitrary, whereas the music has a rhythm and a tempo and so on, and it's much easier to take the music once it's been set and then readjust it with the cuts, so it works with the music really well.
It's kind of incredible, though, how this song has persevered, though, what you've given everybody with this, because it was never a single, it was never a video. Nobody knows who the hell Joe Esposito is. He could be sitting here right now. We wouldn't know who he is. But everybody of a certain age hears that first guitar chord, and it's like, oh, it's a Karate Kid song. That's it. And it's homaged all the time, all these years later. It's such an insanely great piece of music. I know I keep harping about it, but I think it's a big piece of this film, though. I really think so. Like, after all these years, it's one of the iconic images that's kind of left over from it.
Yeah, music plays a huge part in movies. Music can connect to the emotions in a way that words don't. It's a very primal thing. So if you've got a good score, you're halfway home. And the Bill Conti, who did the music for Rocky, did the music for this. And when before we started shooting, he gave me a tape of the windpipes, and he said, "What do you think about this sound?" I said, "Oh yeah, this is perfect, because it's spiritual and it's mysterious, and I haven't heard it before." So music plays a big part, and if you're blessed, as I've been, with composers like Bill Conti, you're really ahead of the game.
On top of being, just exciting, the montage, it's actually a very effective and very tidy bit of storytelling, because in 3 minutes, you give us everything we need to know about going into the semifinals. We know everything we need to know about the 4 guys involved just from those 3 minutes alone.
Right. The audience is always there saying, yeah, now what? Now what? You gotta give them new information all the time. Never say the same thing twice. The audience is very smart, and they've come to be entertained. And if you stop for a minute from entertaining them or giving them new information, they're gonna say, holy God, when is this thing gonna be over? It's always gotta be new. So in that montage, it's just enough to keep the story going. Never say the same thing twice.
We learned Bobby's pretty good. He's somebody that you have to worry about if you're fighting in this tournament.
I agree.
Right. And Daniel's getting by, but he's taking a beating along the way, right? He's really getting banged up in this thing as he goes along. And one of my favorite moments, one of my favorite Johnny Lawrence moments is, obviously Lawrence is cruising through this thing. He looks like he could show up in flip-flops. He's just wrecking house. But then there's this other guy, Vidal, there, who we haven't heard of him, but he's like the second coming of Bruce Lee. He's just running circles around people, right? We get these 2 clips of him just wrecking shop on people. And after the second time we see it, they go right to Johnny. You got to figure everybody in the crowd's like, dude, who's this guy? Right on Johnny, and Johnny's like, he's not that good.
Yeah, I know.
And And second, since I had you up here, I wanted to ask about the crane technique. Obviously, that's the other iconic, image from the film, the tournament. How did that come up?
That's a great question. It originally came up when we first started talking about it, that the storyline goes that he injures a knee, so he has to stand on one leg and do this kick. So Pat Johnson, the stunt coordinator, and John were telling me about this idea. They want to stand on top of the stump and then kick with one leg and then land on that leg. And I said, well, there's a kick like that, but you kind of have to land on the other leg. And actually, Pat Johnson and John, they brought a stump in to the rehearsal hall. So it was like a room like this, and they have a stump, and Pat is holding it like this, and I'm up on top. Right? Okay, you want me to do something like with my hands like this, or so it was more or less. There's this kick that we do in karate called double jump kick, and I've seen on the internet. There's a lot of debate about. I made up the crane kick. Oh, that's a real kick. Every style has a kick. So yes, the kick is something that all systems do, but this stuff with the hands like this was all completely made up. So that's that.
So then how did you feel for months afterwards when you saw 10-year-old kids throwing crane kicks on the sidewalk everywhere after walking out of the movie?
Well, you don't want me to go on with how many stories there are about people doing crane kicks, but keeping in mind that I was doing the tournament circuit at the time, after the movie came out, I was a karate celebrity because of that move. And right after that, my wife and I got married in '86, and it's one of the best stories. I was in Mazatlan on my honeymoon, and all the kids were doing the crane kick in Mexico. It's like, oh wow, they really had some traction there.
Last thing I want to ask before I throw back to Brian is about Johnny, because if there was a Mount Rushmore of movie villains, Johnny Lawrence in all his headband glory would be the first one I'd carve into the side of it. He's just awesome. I wanted to ask the two of you about how kind of you came up with Johnny, what went into making him who he was in the movie. Do that one again? So just as far as coming up with Johnny Lawrence, the character, what went into it as far as making him who he was?
Well, again, that's Robert Kamen. He was the storyteller. He wrote the character, and he nailed it because he's a terrific writer. And then this guy personified him. So I said action.
Please.
I tried to find, I think why I could connect with a character like Johnny is to find, a vulnerable part of him. And really when I got to the end of the script and he says, "You're all right, LaRusso," I'm like, oh, he's not just a two-dimensional asshole. He's a guy who's misguided. And then when I met John Kreese, Marty Cove, and saw that, and Pat Johnson taught me that way, I kind of got who Johnny was. So to me, Johnny was, even though he's kind of vicious, I had to find justification for everything. And it's been said in pop culture little circles and everything, but and watching the movie, I'm like, no, I'm really a jerk. I really am. I'm trying but I mean, he kind of started everything. I mean, there was a reason why. He's the one that started the fight. He took the first swing. And he took my girlfriend, and he came from out of town. He puts water on my head. So the way he had a lot of these things coming. Of course, Johnny came to, overcompensated, being so bad about it. But I was trained wrong, and so for me, it was the reason I could play him was because of kind of the ending and knowing that there was going to be a turning point at the sweep the leg moment. Although I could never have imagined it the way it happened, because I remember when I got there with Marty Cove and the camera's there and he says sweep the leg, just how intense and intimidating he was to me. My reaction to him was really organic and natural, but so it was interesting. I mean, I really kind of lived this character, and we all kind of grew up through it, and all of us. And during the end, I remember the last few days of filming in the tournament scenes, and all of us were getting kind of depressed a little bit, and we're like, is it because the movie's coming to an end? We're having such a great time. And Rob Garrison, who played Get Him a Body Bag Tommy, he was out to find out what was going on with us. Why are we all so down? And he goes, I talked to my acting coach, and I kind of figured it out. And I was like, what's going on? He goes, well, he asked, what are your characters going through right now? Well, right now we're kind of waking up that we've been under a spell of this kind of bad guy, and we're being disillusioned, and this guy that was our mentor is letting us down in a really big way. And truly that's what was like, so that's kind of what you're experiencing, on top of the fact that in a couple days we weren't gonna have the lobster dinners, you know, and the fun and the amazing time we had on this movie. It was just, you know, really, truly just I mean, it's amazing how a few months of your life could just stay with you forever. If nobody ever saw the film, I'd feel that way. I mean, it was such a special group of people and time, and so Johnny was kind of trained. I mean, it was on paper first of all, and then it was in the plot, and you know, my character had his position on the antagonist, but my job was to try to find something that was understandable and relate about him and deeper than just, that's the asshole gets his butt kicked at the end and he loses, you know. So, and Marty Cove becomes the real villain, Crease is the real villain. So that all happened through a lot of hands. I mean, you know, and I was a very young, brand new actor, and I remember looking at John all the time, like, how was that? And he was good. You know, if he had a note, he would give you a note. If I had an idea, he'd say, no. Or try that. You know, but very simple directing, which was really great because he didn't over-direct or make you feel like every scene he's gonna give you props or not. But he created this environment truly that you just could feel safe and know that you were just doing this. And for a first time, for a first film, and for all the experience of that, you know, nothing's compared to that for me. You know, the whole.
And get him a body bag wasn't in the script. That was improvised, and that's an example of your actors being really in the story, and you're always wise to encourage them to come up with stuff, and that's a great example of something that came from that place.
Let's take some audience questions. Do we have any audience questions? Way in the back on the aisle. Yep, you. Hand up.
Yeah, did you see that Funny or Die thing with Ralph Macchio?
Yeah.
Did you see the Funny or Die thing that Ralph Macchio did?
Yeah, I've used it. Wax on something off.
Oh, the thing you guys did.
No, that was sweep the leg. Ralph did wax on.
Oh, yes.
Sorry for all the things we're doing
Right,
with your
right.
movie, John. Yeah, Ralph did wax on F off. I'm not gonna. I don't know how many kids are. Have you seen that on Funny or Die? Raise your hands just let me see if you've seen it. Okay, yeah, really funny.
No, that was very funny. We're sick of being the nice guy.
Right.
It's very funny.
And it was on the eve of, they made a remake of some classic movie, I forgot. Anyway, Ralph made a video just around the time that came out, 2010.
Another question? Another audience question, anyone? Way in the back row.
Okay, well, we're sort of going a little bit beginning of two here, but I always wondered why they felt it was necessary to change the female lead in each film. Because they set up these great women and then they're gone.
Why did you change the female lead in each sequel?
Oh, anybody want to take a guess? What? Yes. Yeah, she wanted too much dough. Or her agent did, or anyway, there was going to be a scene in the second one where I can't remember. Does anybody remember what? It was like, you know, you've been fun, but I'll see you around. But she wanted too much dough, so you know, turns out she left town. It's negotiating your price in the movie world is a very, very difficult and chancy thing, and don't push your luck. Don't be greedy.
How about working with Elizabeth Shue in general?
Oh, she
though?
was delightful. Again, and I just saw a movie of hers that I had never heard of on Netflix last night, Cousin Bet. And she was just incredible in this thing. And this was her first movie. She had done Burger King commercials. And Carol Jones, this great casting lady I had, found her. And she came in, and she and Ralph hit it off. And she was right there all the time. She was just absolutely, I was very fortunate. And I'm sure there are other people that we auditioned for that role, but I have no recollection of them.
Guys, how about your experience working with Elizabeth Shue?
I love Elizabeth Shue. We had a great time. I miss her. She was the only person in the movie, except for the spinning heel kick Darryl Vidal threw in the final fight, which, by the way, when we were doing the tournament, he's like, how hard do you want to go? I'm like, go for it, man. You know, and first kick, spinning right in the solar plexus, and I was like, oh man, so that was it. But other than that, Elizabeth Shue in the country club scene, she hit me every single time. And, you know, that little right cross she gives me, it was just humorous. I mean, she couldn't stop pulling that punch. I'm like, you're there. I'm fighting with Ralph the entire movie. I have one scene with you, and you will not stop punching me in the jaw. She's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, she literally punched me every single time. We got along great. I think we went to the premiere together the first time and exchanged books, and she was just a sweetheart. I mean, she was just a doll, just as she is in the movie.
Ron, you got anything?
She's a sweetheart. Again, we were kind of encouraged to keep our distance from Elizabeth and Ralph, even though Ralph would, you know, he'd look around, see if John wasn't watching or Jerry or something. Come on in my trailer, come on in my trailer. I got some pie. Cool, banana cream? No, pizza, man. Yeah, Elizabeth was fantastic. I think she drove the wardrobe and the makeup people a little bit nuts, but other than that, why? She's a female.
You guys have talked a little bit about Martin Cove. Any other stories about Martin Cove?
Well, I originally had Perry King lined up for that role. I thought he could play it like an ex-Nazi. But he wanted to do a TV series. And then Steven Seagal came in to audition. And he was working out some big agent in Hollywood who got Jerry to have this guy come in. I'd never heard of him, and it was 7 or 8 o'clock at night after the day's business, and this guy came in and he had a cape, a white cape and so forth, and he started telling me about his work with the CIA, and whoa, this guy is in another solar system. We started shooting, and we hadn't cast the part yet. And then one day, Carol told me about this fellow, and I said, okay. We sat around 3 o'clock, and Marty came in, and he was very angry that it had to be kept waiting and so forth. He had a lot of attitude, and I said, I think this is the guy. He was delightful, and we became good friends, and he did a great job.
Absolutely. Now, we do have another picture to watch, so John, do you want to set up Karate Kid Part 2 for us? And
well, it begins with the parking lot scene that was supposed to end the first one. And around the middle of the second one, Mr. Miyagi explains to Daniel where the secret of Miyagi family karate came from. And he tells the story of his ancestor, who was a fisherman who was out fishing, had too much sake, too much sun, fell asleep, woke up off the coast of China, came back 10 years later with a Chinese wife and a kid, and the secret of Miyagi family karate. So when we started thinking about doing a third one, I said, let's do that. Remember that story he tells the guy? Well, let them hit their heads, and they time travel back 1,000 years to China, and we're there with the original Mr. Miyagi, who Pat can play also, and we see what happened during those 10 years, and Miyagi and Daniel peek through the bushes, and they see all this stuff going on, and Coca-Cola owned Columbia at the time, And they loved the idea of going into China and opening up a new market. The Chinese loved it because it was totally apolitical. Nothing had been done, shot in China, and China is a very special looking place. So it would have been great, but they decided no, that would cost too much, which it wouldn't have. And so we did the first one over again, and that's why the third one is. But it could have been terrific if we'd gone to China. Another almost.
Well, we're so grateful you all came out tonight to be with us. Thank you very much. We're going to take a break and then watch Karate Kid Part 2.